Imagine raising a daughter your whole life, giving her everything, only to end up sleeping in a laundry room and showering with a garden hose. That's what happened to me. And what I did next changed everything. Please don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Your support means the world to me. My name is Martha Henley. I'm 59 years old, born and raised in Pennsylvania. For more than 3 decades, I was Robert's wife. He was my partner, my safe place, and together we built a life filled with love, hard work, and traditions. Robert ran our family's small hardware business, and I was always by his side, managing books, helping customers, and raising our only daughter, Kimberly. When Robert passed, a deep silence took over my house. I can still hear the echo of his chair scraping against the kitchen floor, the little cough he made before speaking, the way he always called me Marty. Suddenly, it was all gone. I was left staring at empty walls that felt like strangers. That's when Kim stepped in. She hugged me tightly one evening and whispered, "Mom, come live with us. We're family. We'll take care of you now." Her words felt like a lifeline. I was fragile, lonely, and terrified of facing the nights alone. I wanted to believe her. So I sold the house Robert and I built together. Every brick carried a memory, every corner his touch. But I told myself, it's for the best. Kim needs the money for her growing family, and I'll be surrounded by love. I added some of Robert's pension savings and even chipped in for the renovations of their new house. I imagined myself in a sunny guest room, maybe with a rocking chair by the window. A place where I could still feel like Martha, not just someone's burden. But reality was far from that dream. When we moved in, I was led not to a guest room, but to what used to be their laundry space. 4 bare walls, a folding cot, and boxes stacked high around me. My own belongings? Most of them were shoved into the garage. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile when Kim said, "It's temporary, Mom, just until we get everything set up." But days turned into weeks, and the room remained the same. Cold, cramped, forgotten. It didn't take long before my role in the household shifted. I was no longer Martha, Robert's widow, or Kim's mother. I was the babysitter, the unpaid maid, the one who stayed quiet so as not to cause trouble. The lowest point came when Kim announced casually, "Oh, Mom, the water heater's broken. It'll take time to fix, so it's easier if you just rinse off outside with the garden hose." At first, I thought she was joking, but she wasn't. That night, under the pale moonlight, I stood in the backyard, gripping the hose as cold water splashed against my skin. I prayed none of the neighbors were watching. I prayed my grandchildren wouldn't peek through the window. Each drop wasn't just water. It was humiliation, sinking deep into my bones. I told myself, be patient. She's your daughter. Families go through rough times. But in my heart, something broke. And then came the day that changed everything. The day I realized something inside me had shifted was a Tuesday morning. I had driven my 2 grandkids to school, like I always did. Their laughter in the back seat was the only warmth I felt most days. I told myself that at least they needed me, even if their mother no longer seemed to. When I pulled into the driveway, I caught sight of something that stopped me cold. There, hanging from the side mirror of Kim's car, was the very garden hose I had been forced to use for weeks. It wasn't an accident. The way it was looped neatly, tied almost like a ribbon, felt deliberate. A reminder, a mocking echo of my humiliation. I stood there, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. My chest burned. For the first time, I didn't just feel hurt. I felt angry. I felt awake. Robert used to say, "Marty, a person can forgive mistakes, but never cruelty." That morning, I I realized I had been excusing cruelty under the disguise of family loyalty. I walked inside quietly, set my purse on the table, and instead of heading to the laundry room, I sat down in the kitchen. My hands searched for a pen and paper like they had a mind of their own. I opened an old notebook I had tucked away among my things and wrote across the first page in bold letters, "What I gave." Line by line, I began to trace back every dollar, every sacrifice, every so-called gift that had come from my pocket. The down payment on the house? Mine. The shiny new sofa in the living room? Mine. The summer vacation they bragged about to friends? Mine. Even the tuition check for my granddaughter's music lessons? Mine. As the list grew, my stomach churned. Tens of thousands of dollars. Not from Kim and her husband, but from me. And what had I received in return? A cot in a laundry room and cold water from a hose. The more I wrote, the straighter my back became. It was as though each word restored a piece of the dignity I had lost. By the time I filled half the notebook, I no longer felt like a shadow in someone else's house. I felt like Martha Henley, the woman who had run a business side by side with her husband, who had balanced books, managed staff, raised a family, and held everything together. I was not weak. I was not disposable. That night, I slept on the cot, but I did not feel small. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying Robert's voice in my head, the way he always reminded me, "Don't let anyone forget who you are, Marty." The next morning, I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Martin Ellis, Robert's old friend and our family lawyer. My voice trembled when he answered, but I forced myself to speak. "Martin, it's Martha. I need your help." He didn't rush me. He didn't interrupt. He just listened as I poured out the truth. The money, the mistreatment, the humiliation. When I finally ran out of words, silence filled the line. Then Martin spoke, his voice steady and sharp. "Martha, you've been far too generous. It's time to take back your respect." Those words lit a fire in me. Martin laid out a plan, a trust for my grandson Max, revoking the power of attorney Kim had quietly taken over, freezing accounts she had been using without permission. He told me to gather proof, keep records, and document everything. And I did. Like a woman on a mission, I collected bank statements, receipts, and every email trail I could find. I tucked them neatly into a folder, labeling it in bold red ink. Evidence. When I walked past Kim in the hallway, she barely noticed me. To her, I was still just the quiet figure who folded laundry and drove the kids. She had no idea that the tide had begun to turn. But I knew. For the first time in months, I felt alive. My steps had weight again, and my silence was no longer fear. It was strategy. Saying no the first time didn't sound brave. It sounded quiet and ordinary, like the click of a light switch in a dark room. Kim stood in the doorway with her tote bag on her shoulder and her keys jangling, and she called over her shoulder, "Mom, can you grab the kids this afternoon and also swing by Costco? We're out of paper towels and laundry pods. Oh, and can you Venmo me for the piano tuner since you promised to help with lessons?" I was rinsing a teacup. I dried my hands carefully, the way I used to count bills at the shop, deliberate, precise. "No," I said, and surprised myself with how even it sounded. "I won't be able to today." Her head tilted, smile fixed. "You always do Tuesdays." "I won't today," I repeated. "And I won't be sending money for the tuner. That wasn't a promise. That was an assumption." The smile tightened. I saw it, just a flicker, like a fisherman feeling the line pull against his palm. "Okay," she said lightly. "No worries," and disappeared down the hall, her voice turning bright for the kids as she hustled them out the door. When the house fell silent again, I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook open to the page that read, "What I gave." I added a new line. Boundaries. Priceless. It was corny maybe, but I needed the reminder. Not everything could be tracked in dollars and cents. I spent the morning sorting my folder labeled Evidence, bank statements, screenshots, a hand-drawn timeline of when each temporary arrangement became permanent. After Robert died, I had let life happen to me. Now, I was happening to life. At noon, I drove to the bank. The teller, a woman with kind eyes and a cardigan that looked hand-knitted, clicked through my accounts. I watched the numbers blink like small, fleeing fish. "Mrs. Henley?" she said gently. "Do you recognize these recurring transfers?" She spun the monitor toward me. Grocery deliveries, subscription boxes I'd never opened, ride shares at odd hours, a home goods store I didn't shop at. Each was a small mouth, sipping. "I do not," I said. She flagged them and printed a stack of papers as thick as a church bulletin. "We'll start the dispute process, and I recommend we remove any joint access to your accounts." "Remove it," I said, and felt the ground under me grow steadier. When I returned, Kim's minivan was already in the driveway. On the side mirror, the garden hose was gone. The mirror was clean, almost polished. A new welcome mat lay at the door, printed with cursive letters. "Home Sweet Home." I could taste the performance of it before I stepped inside. "Mom!" Kim called, her voice surely audible to the next county. "I picked up your favorite salad from that deli you like, and I found your old picture frames. Let's put those up in your room tonight." "Your room? The laundry room with the cot and the boxes?" I smiled politely. "Thank you for the salad." She watched me eat, making small talk about the school fundraiser, the neighbor's dog, a new boutique downtown. It all sounded like a radio station slightly off frequency. When I finished, she leaned forward as if the real program were starting. "So," she said, "about the utilities. The gas bill was higher this month. If you could." "I won't be paying household bills anymore," I said. "I've closed the joint card. From now on, I'll manage my own expenses." The clock ticked on the wall, each second a little tap on glass. She blinked and let her mouth form the shape of a laugh without the sound. "Right. Well, we'll sort it out." That evening, she brought me a little gift bag tied with a ribbon. Lavender soap, a candle, a note. "Love you, Mom." I held the bar of soap in my hand, its fragrance soft and clean. Out back, the hose lay coiled in the grass like a shed skin. The next day, I told her I wouldn't be available for school pickups, for a while. She opened her mouth, shut it, then opened it again. "But your schedule is the most flexible," she said, careful to keep the sweetness in her tone. "That's the whole point of you being here with us. We help each other." "I'm happy to help when I decide to," I said. "Not because my help is assumed." That was the first wobble. The second came when I moved 3 of my boxes from the garage to the tiny strip of wall beside the cot and opened them. I chose what mattered. A photo of Robert with his arm around me at the 4th of July fair. His pocket knife, dull with use. The old ledger we kept at the hardware store where my handwriting leaned with the afternoons. A quilt my mother had sewn in squares the color of sweet corn. I arranged them like fragments of a map that only I could read. The laundry room looked slightly less like a holding cell, slightly more like a place where a woman lived. When Kim saw the ledger on the shelf, she smiled tightly. "We should declutter," she said. "Minimalism is very in, Mom." "Minimalism is a choice," I said. "I didn't choose to have my life put in boxes." That night, I called Martin Ellis and told him about the unauthorized transactions. He sighed, not unkindly. "You've done well documenting. We'll move forward. I'm drafting letters. We'll set up a trust for Max, and will rescind any powers granted in your grief. I need you steady, Martha." "I am steady," I said, and realized it was true. The following morning, the house smelled like pancakes and apology. Kim had set the table for 4, which she never did on school days. "We're having breakfast together," she announced brightly, "like old times." "Old times," I repeated, and took a seat. The kids chattered about a science project. Kim kept her eyes on me, checking whether the syrup and small talk were softening the edges she'd noticed. I asked for the butter and passed it back without commentary. In the past, I would have filled silence with helpfulness. "Do you need me to? Should I?" I didn't. I let the quiet stand on its own feet. Later, when she followed me into the hallway, her voice lowered. "Are you mad at me, Mom?" "I'm disappointed in how things have been," I said. "And I'm changing what I accept." She swallowed. There it was again, the fisherman's palm stung by a line pulling the other way. "We can fix it," she said quickly. "Maybe we could look at guest room furniture? I saw a daybed on sale, and the plumber is coming about the water heater, so—" "You don't need to buy furniture to fix respect," I said. And the hose was never about plumbing. I spent the afternoon at the library, where the air smelled like paper and dust and second chances. I printed copies of everything for Martin and mailed the packet from the post office, the clerk stamping each envelope with a sturdy thunk that sounded like the period at the end of a long sentence. When I came home, a new basket of folded towels sat outside the laundry room door, topped with a handwritten note. "For you." The towels were soft, hotel white. I touched them, thinking how kindness can be real, or it can be currency. I left the note on the basket and took only one towel inside. That evening, Kim's husband, Daniel, appeared in the doorway to the laundry room. He leaned on the frame as if to remind me who owned it. "Heard you've been making changes," he said, trying out a friendly tone that dripped. "I have," I said. "Just remember," he added, "we're all one family. Families share." "They do," I agreed. "They share respect." For a moment, something unspoken passed between us, the knowledge that the old terms had expired. He cleared his throat, pushed off the doorframe, and walked away. I slept that night with my quilt pulled up to my chin, one hand on the ledger, as though Robert's steady numbers could keep watch with me. Outside the window, the tiny frosted pane that faced the side yard, the motion light clicked on and off with every passing cat, like a heartbeat steadying itself after a hard run. In the morning, a delivery truck rumbled to the curb. Through the kitchen window, I watched the driver carry a certified envelope to the porch and ask for a signature. Kim signed, smiled, shut the door, and frowned at the seal as if the paper itself had insulted her. She turned it over in her hands, once, twice. The motion light flicked on even though it was daytime. I poured my tea and waited. Some packages you tear open without a thought. Others make you pause because you already suspect what's inside. Kim paused. What happened after she broke that seal would test every story we'd been telling ourselves. About love, about help, about who gives and who takes, and nothing in this house would sound the same once the paper spoke. Kim stood frozen with the envelope in her hand, her thumb tracing the corner of the seal as though it burned. She finally pulled it open with a sharp tear, her eyes darting left and right like a child caught sneaking sweets. I watched from the table, calm, steady, tea steaming between my palms. The silence in the kitchen thickened until it seemed the walls themselves were listening. Her lips moved as she read, her face shifting through shades of disbelief, then irritation, then something I hadn't seen in her for a long time. Fear. This can't be right," she stammered, shaking the paper. "It says the trust is being redirected, that I no longer have—" She stopped, biting her lip. Her eyes snapped up to mine. Mom, what did you do? I set my cup down gently. I did what Robert would have wanted. I protected what's left of our family's dignity, what's left of mine. Her hand trembled, but her voice grew sharper. You went behind my back? After everything we've done for you? I almost laughed at the word done. Done was letting me sleep in a laundry room. Done was forcing me into the yard with a garden hose. Done was siphoning off my money without permission. But I didn't laugh. I just said, I didn't go behind your back, Kimberly. I finally stood up straight. Her husband Daniel came in just then, hair messy, tie loose, holding his phone. What's going on? He asked. Kim waved the papers at him. She's cutting us off. She's sabotaging everything we built. He frowned, snatching the letter, eyes scanning the lines. His face darkened. Martha, do you understand what this means? You can't just... I can. I interrupted. My voice was firmer than I expected, like a door shutting after a storm. And I did. Those accounts were mine. That trust was mine to create. You've lived off my silence long enough. For a moment, no one spoke. The clock ticked in the hallway, loud and certain. My heart raced, but my spine held. Kim tried again, switching tactics. She softened her voice, pulling a chair close to me. Mom, she whispered, you don't have to do this. We'll fix the water heater. We'll give you the guest room. We'll make it better. Please, just don't take this away from us. Her eyes glistened, but the tears felt rehearsed, like a script from a play she thought I would never stop buying tickets to. Once, I would have melted. Once, I would have believed, but not anymore. You don't have to fix what you should never have broken, I said quietly. The children came bounding down the stairs then, backpacks bouncing. Grandma! Max hugged me tightly, his small arms a balm to my heart. He didn't know about trust funds or legal letters. All he knew was that I was his safe place. I hugged him back, a little longer than usual. That night, Kim set the dinner table with candles and wine, trying to paint over cracks with charm. We should talk as a family, she said, pouring glasses, smiling too wide. Daniel chimed in. Maybe we can come to an arrangement without lawyers. Keep it civil. I cut my chicken calmly, placing each piece neatly on my plate. This isn't about civility, I said. It's about respect, and respect isn't negotiable. The air thinned. Kim's fork clattered against her plate. Daniel's jaw worked, chewing anger instead of food. After dinner, I carried my folder of evidence into my room and placed it beside Robert's ledger. I traced his handwriting with my finger, steady and neat, the way he always kept the books. I whispered to the quiet room, I'm doing it, Robert. I'm finally doing it. For the first time in months, I fell asleep without dread pressing on my chest. I dreamed not of hoses or boxes in the garage, but of wide windows and sunlight pouring onto a table where I drank tea without shame. The next morning, I began looking at small apartments. A place of my own. A place with a door that locked from the inside, with a kitchen that smelled of coffee instead of resentment. Kim noticed my search tabs open on the laptop. Her face went pale. You're leaving? She asked. I'm choosing myself, I answered. Her voice cracked, sharp with panic. If you walk out, don't expect us to come crawling after you. Don't expect... I stood, taller than I'd felt in years. Kimberly, I don't expect anything from you anymore. That's the point. She flinched. For the first time, she realized her grip was gone. And deep down, I knew. What came next would not just change where I lived, it would change who I was allowed to be. Because once a woman remembers her worth, she can never be erased again. Leaving didn't happen in a burst of drama. It began quietly, like the first crack in ice before the river shifts. One morning, instead of doing the breakfast dishes, I folded 3 of my blouses, my mother's quilt, and Robert's ledger into a small suitcase. I zipped it up and placed it by the cot. The sound of the zipper was louder than Daniel's television in the next room. For weeks, I had been scrolling through listings, circling apartments with rent I could manage on my own. Most were modest, 1-bedroom units in older buildings, kitchens tiled in the 70s, windows that faced parking lots instead of gardens. But every picture looked like freedom to me. Freedom had no chandeliers, it had locks that only I could turn. That afternoon, I met with Martin Ellis again, this time in his office. His desk smelled faintly of lemon polish and old paper. He adjusted his glasses and studied the stack of evidence I had collected. Bank statements, emails, the note from Kim about the broken water heater, even the photograph of the garden hose tied mockingly to the car mirror. "You've done exactly what you should," Martin said at last. "You've given them every chance to treat you with respect, and they squandered it. Now you protect yourself." His words washed over me like sunlight on cold skin. Protect yourself. I realized I had been waiting for someone else, Robert, Kim, even the grandchildren, to rescue me from humiliation. But the only person who could rescue me was already sitting in that chair. On my way home, I stopped by the small apartment complex I had seen online. The manager, a cheerful woman with gray hair pinned into a bun, unlocked the door for me. "It's simple," she said, "but clean. Quiet neighbors, too." I stepped inside. The space smelled faintly of paint and pine cleaner. There was one window, wide and sunlit, looking out at a maple tree whose leaves were just beginning to redden. A stove stood in the corner, old but sturdy. I touched the counter and felt tears prick my eyes. It wasn't much, but it was mine, or it would be. "Can I think about it?" I asked, though in my heart the answer was already yes. Driving back, I felt a strange mix of grief and relief. Grief for the years I had allowed myself to shrink. Relief that shrinking was ending. When I walked through Kim's front door, she was waiting. Her arms were crossed, her lips pinched. "Where were you?" "I had errands," I said calmly. Her eyes narrowed. "You've been different, distant. What are you planning, Mom?" I met her gaze evenly. "I'm planning to live with dignity again." Her face flushed, but before she could speak, Max ran into the room, holding a school drawing of a tree with stick figure people beneath it. "Grandma, I made this for you," he shouted. I knelt, hugging him tightly, pressing the paper to my chest. That night, Kim tried once more. She knocked on the laundry room door, carrying another gift bag, this time with lotion and slippers. "I don't want us to fight," she said softly. I looked at the slippers. Pretty, pink, still with tags. "It's not fighting, Kim," I said. "It's me finally saying no." Her eyes filled with tears, but there was steel beneath them. "If you walk out, Mom, you'll regret it. Family is supposed to stay together." "Family," I said, "is supposed to lift each other up, not hold each other down." I closed the door gently. On the shelf above my cot, Robert's ledger seemed to glow faintly in the lamplight. His handwriting was steady, every line a promise of order. I whispered, "I'm almost there, Robert, almost free." And I knew my first step out of that house would be my first step back into myself. The next morning, I woke with a single thought echoing through me. Tomorrow, I would sign the lease. But I didn't know yet that Kim had plans of her own, and they would test every ounce of strength I had just begun to reclaim. The morning I went to sign the lease, the house felt different. The air was charged, like the seconds before a thunderstorm. Kim moved around the kitchen with a brittle cheerfulness, her voice pitched too high, every word stretched thin. "Coffee, Mom? I made it just the way you like." She slid the cup across the counter with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. I thanked her, but didn't drink. My papers were tucked neatly into my purse, the rental application, Martin's legal notes, even the deposit check I had written with a trembling but determined hand. Halfway through her toast, Kim finally said what had been crouching behind her teeth. "Daniel and I were talking. We don't think moving out is a good idea. People will start asking questions. The family won't understand. And—" She paused, eyes darting to mine. "It looks bad, like we aren't taking care of you." I felt the words sink, heavy and sharp. Not bad that you've been living in a laundry room. Not bad that you showered with a hose. No, bad for their image. "Kim," I said softly, "you stopped taking care of me a long time ago. I'm just taking care of myself now." Her hand clenched around her mug. "If you walk away, don't expect us to be there when you need help. Don't expect the kids to—" I cut her off. "Do not use my grandchildren as bargaining chips." My voice startled even me. It had weight. It had Robert's steadiness. She flinched, but didn't back down. "Mom, you can't just undo everything we've built together." I let out a breath that felt like it had been stuck inside me for years. "Everything we built? Kimberly, I paid for the bricks, the furniture, the bills. I built this house with my money. You built it with my silence." Her face drained of color. For a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to tug at my apron strings, begging for another story before bed. But then Daniel walked in, and her expression hardened. "Maybe we need to talk about guardianship," he said casually, leaning against the counter. "If you're making rash decisions, Martha, we should step in legally to keep things safe." Guardianship. The word cracked through me like a whip. To suggest that I, who had raised her, who had managed a business, who had survived grief and humiliation, was suddenly unfit to make choices. It was a cruelty Robert had warned me about long ago. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. Instead, I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope Martin had given me. I placed it on the table between us. "This," I said, "is my decision. It's already in motion. The trust is established. The accounts are secured. And if you attempt to question my competency, I'll let the court see every receipt, every transfer, every humiliating detail I've endured under this roof." Daniel's smirk faltered. Kim's eyes filled again, but this time with something rawer. Panic. "You'd ruin us?" she whispered. I stood, gathering my purse. "I'm not ruining you. I'm rescuing myself." I left the kitchen in silence, my suitcase already waiting by the door. As I lifted the handle, Max ran down the stairs, holding the drawing he had made earlier that week. "Grandma, you forgot this." He pressed the paper into my hands, his smile bright and unknowing. I knelt, kissing his forehead. "I'll never forget you, sweetheart. You're the reason I remembered who I am." The weight of the suitcase felt lighter than the years I'd carried on my back. When I closed the door behind me, the house didn't sigh or groan. It simply let me go. And as I walked down the driveway toward my car, I knew this wasn't just moving out. This was reclaiming my name, my life, my dignity. But I also knew families don't give up power quietly. What Kim and Daniel would do next could be worse than any silent cruelty. And I had to be ready. The apartment key was small, brass, and cool in my hand. When the landlord pressed it into my palm, I felt as if I had been given a crown. Not grand, not gilded, just a crown of quiet, of privacy, of choosing when to lock the door. The new place was modest. One bedroom, a kitchen with laminate counters, walls freshly painted a soft cream. The window overlooked a maple tree whose leaves were beginning to scatter like sparks of fire in the autumn wind. I walked from room to room with my suitcase rolling behind me, touching the doorknobs, the shelves, the light switches. Simple things, but mine. For the first time in months, I unpacked my blouses into a real closet. I spread my mother's quilt across the bed, laid Robert's ledger on the nightstand, and taped Max's drawing of the tree beside it. That evening, I brewed a cup of tea and carried it to the small kitchen table. There were no children yelling, no voices demanding errands or money, no hose coiled in the grass outside. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the clock. I breathed, deep and full, and it tasted like freedom. The next morning, I visited Martin again. His office smelled of leather-bound books and old ink, a place where decisions carried weight. He looked over the signed lease, nodded approvingly, and slid a new folder toward me. "These are the final steps," he explained. "The trust for Max is now active. The revocation of Kimberly's power of attorney has been processed, and here," he tapped a paper with his pen, "are copies of your account closures. They cannot touch your finances anymore." I traced the words with my finger. Untouchable. It was a word I hadn't felt in a long time, but Martin leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Prepare yourself, Martha. When people lose what they feel entitled to, they fight. They may come to you with apologies, gifts, promises, or they may come with anger. You must hold steady." His warning was prophetic. Within days, Kim called. At first, her voice was sugar. "Mom, we miss you. The kids keep asking when you'll come back. Why don't you come for dinner? Let's just talk." I closed my eyes, listening to her words twist like vines around my heart. For decades, I had bent toward that sweetness, craving it. But now, I recognized it for what it was, a lure. "Not tonight," I said firmly. "Not tomorrow either. I need space, Kimberly. Real space." Her tone snapped like a wire pulled too tight. "Fine. If you want to isolate yourself, go ahead. But don't expect us to keep reaching out forever." I hung up before the silence could strangle me. That evening, as I sat at my little table with the maple leaves swirling outside, I whispered to Robert's photograph. "I wish you could see me now. I'm standing, finally standing." Yet even in that moment of strength, I sensed the storm gathering. Families who are used to taking don't stop at the first no. The question was, how far would they go to pull me back? The storm came sooner than I expected. On Saturday morning, there was a knock at my door. Not polite, not gentle. Sharp, hurried. When I opened it, Kim stood there with Daniel behind her, both of them smiling too brightly, like salespeople rehearsing a pitch. "Mom!" Kim exclaimed, stepping forward without waiting for an invitation. "We thought we'd surprise you. The kids are in the car. We wanted to bring them up, show them your new place." I blocked the doorway with my body. "Not today," I said. Her smile froze, then cracked. "What do you mean, not today? We're family. We should be able to see where you live." Daniel's voice rumbled behind her. "We're worried, Martha. This apartment, it doesn't look safe. You'd be better off back home with us." "Back in the laundry room?" I asked calmly. "Back with the garden hose?" Kim's cheeks flushed red. "Why do you keep bringing that up? It wasn't like that. You're twisting everything. We were just trying to make it work." "Trying to make it work for whom?" I asked. The silence stretched. Daniel shifted, annoyed. "Look, this is ridiculous. You're being manipulated by that lawyer. He's filling your head with nonsense." I straightened my shoulders. Martin Ellis has been a friend to this family longer than you've been in it, Daniel. He doesn't fill my head. He clears it. Kim's eyes glistened, but her voice sharpened. So that's it? You're cutting us off? After all we've done for you? All you've done to me, I corrected. She swallowed hard, her hands twisting. If you walk away, Mom, you'll regret it. The kids will grow up thinking you abandoned them. Her words pierced me, but I steadied my breath. No, Kimberly. They'll grow up remembering who I was, because I'm going to show them. Not a servant, not a shadow. Their grandmother. Daniel muttered under his breath. You'll regret this. I closed the door before the poison could drip further. Inside, my heart pounded, but my hands didn't shake. I pressed my back against the door and whispered, You're stronger than this, Martha. You survived Robert's death. You can survive their anger. Later that evening, I sat with my tea by the window. The maple tree outside flickered in the autumn wind, branches swaying but not breaking. I traced the rim of my cup, realizing I was like that tree, weathered, scarred, but rooted. I had chosen myself, and though the storm was far from over, I knew I would not bend again. Because once a woman learns she deserves respect, no amount of guilt, no gift, no threat can chain her back. And deep down, I could sense it. The next move they made would show just how desperate they really were. The day the demand letter went out, the air felt newly crisp, like a page turning. Martin called me at noon. It's formal now, he said. A request for restitution, an accounting of funds, and a cease on further use of your name or accounts. Delivery confirmed. I thanked him and set the phone down beside Robert's ledger, tracing the familiar loops of his handwriting. The lines still looked like rails, straight, steady, a way forward. I brewed tea, let it steep longer than usual, and carried it to the window. Outside, the maple tossed its leaves like small flags. I had become someone I barely recognized, quieter, stronger, not weighed down by apology. By late afternoon, my phone chimed. A message from Kim. Family dinner tonight. 6, well, please come. We need to talk. She didn't ask if I was available. She declared it, the way she used to assign me errands. For a moment, the old reflex tugged. Say yes, smooth it over, be the bridge. Then I pictured the cot in the laundry room and the hose coiled in the grass, and the tug lost its strength. I typed back, I'll come. For 1 hour. I arrived on time with my folder in my tote, the one labeled Evidence. The front door opened before I knocked twice. The house smelled of balsamic glaze and cinnamon, comfort smells, stage lights warmed and ready. The dining table was set with the good dishes I had bought last Christmas. My money, their centerpiece. Candles burned low. A playlist hummed. I recognized the choreography. Mom? Kim sang out, stepping forward with an embrace that grazed air. You look wonderful. Doesn't she look wonderful, Dan? Great, Daniel said, already pouring wine, the host with perfect timing. To family, he announced, lifting a glass. To family, I echoed, and did not drink. We made conversation about the children, Max's science fair, Lila's piano recital, a new class pet at school. For a few minutes, we sounded ordinary. The illusion almost held, the way a painted backdrop can pass for sky if you don't stare too long. Then Kim placed her napkin carefully on the table, fingers smoothing the edge. So, she said, about the letter. I waited, let silence work. Robert always said silence was a tool if you knew how to hold it. We feel blindsided, she continued softly. If you had just told us you were upset, we would have made changes. The guest room is almost ready. The plumber fixed the heater. We even bought you those plush towels you like. We're trying, Mom. You're adjusting to consequences, I said gently. That's different. Her eyes flickered. Daniel set down his glass with too much care. Martha, he said, no one wants this to get messy. Lawyers complicate families. They make simple misunderstandings look like crimes. Nothing about this was a misunderstanding, I replied. I wrote the checks. I saw the transfers. I stood in a backyard with a hose. Kim's composure trembled, then firmed. We've done a spreadsheet, she announced, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were columns in bright colors: groceries, school supplies, household contributions. Totals circled with confidence. This shows how much we have carried since you moved in, she said. How much we've poured into making room for you. I opened my tote and laid my ledger beside her printouts. Not Robert's ledger. Mine, the one that began with what I gave. Receipts, bank statements, copies of text messages with "just until payday" and "we'll reimburse later." The tuition check for Lila's lessons with my signature. The deposit transfer. The furniture invoice. And a photograph of the hose knotted to her mirror, date-stamped by the camera. Here is what I carried, I said. And here is the cost. For a moment, no one spoke. The children's laughter drifted faintly from upstairs, untroubled and bright. A car passed outside. Its headlights slid over the windows like brief moons. Kim touched the photo, her face tightening. You keep bringing up the hose, she said, voice small. It makes it sound so awful. It was, I said, and that's why you want me to stop saying it. Her mouth opened, then closed. A new tactic surfaced, gentle nostalgia. Do you remember when I was little and we went to the county fair? She asked with a wet laugh. I insisted on the Ferris wheel and cried the whole time. I did remember, her shaking hand in mine, the way she buried her face in my sweater at the top, how I sang to her to keep her calm. Memory can be both tender and sharp. I remember, I said. I also remember getting off that ride as soon as we could. Daniel shifted in his chair. Look, he said, voice cooling. We appreciate your help. We do. But there's no reason to involve a trust. If you wanted Max to have something, a savings account would do. This structure feels hostile. Protection is not hostility, I said. It's clarity. Kim's fork scraped ceramic. So, what happens now? She tried to make it sound practical, but panic squeaked at the edges. You want us to pay back every penny? We don't have that lying around. We have a mortgage. The kids need... I didn't ask for everything back, I said. Martin's letter lists what was taken without my consent and what we can document clearly. There are options for a plan and for an apology written as plainly as the invoices you are holding. A plan? She repeated. You mean installments? You'd do that? There was a glint of hope in her voice, the hope of someone who wanted to keep the furniture and the story. I will do what allows me to sleep in peace, I said. Part of that is money, part is boundaries, and part is you telling the truth to yourselves. Her lower lip quivered. We are telling the truth, our truth. Truth doesn't have versions, I said softly. It has details. I tapped the papers. These are the details. She stared at the tablecloth as if the pattern could offer a script. When she looked up again, the sweetness was gone. Fine, she said flatly. If you want to make us look like villains, go ahead. People will judge you, Mom. They'll say you turned your back on your own daughter. People can say many things, I answered. I am done living inside other people's sentences. For a long moment, the three of us sat in a hush so complete I could hear the candle wax softening. Upstairs, little feet pounded, Max and Lila racing down the hall. Childhood has a way of playing on, no matter what lines the adults are drawing. I gathered my folder. My hour is up, I said gently. I'll see the children before I go. Kim's hand shot out, then dropped. Wait, she said, softer again. Mom, can't we find an easier way? I stood. We're finding a right way. I hugged Max and Lila at the foot of the stairs, breathing in their shampoo, letting their chatter wash some of the ache from my chest. I told them I loved them. I told them I would see them soon. I meant it. At the door, Daniel cleared his throat. We got something in the mail, he said carefully. A notice. He didn't say the word, but I felt it anyway. Mediation. Tomorrow morning? I said. Martin told me. We'll sit with a neutral party. We'll all bring our papers. We'll say out loud what we've only whispered. Kim swallowed. And if we don't come? You will, I said. Because you know this isn't about winning. It's about stopping the harm. Outside, the evening had cooled. I walked to my car with my tote snug against my side, the moon a thin, bright coin over the roofline. I drove home to my apartment and set the folder on the kitchen table, beside the teacup waiting for morning. Then I ironed a blouse, my good one, and laid it across the chair. Sleep took its time arriving, but when it came, it was clean. I dreamed of doors unlocking from the inside. At dawn, I stood at the mirror and buttoned my blouse with steady hands. The maple flickered gold in the first light. On my table, the folder sat like a small, quiet anchor. In a few hours, we would sit across from each other with our stories and our proofs, and whatever we said in that room would echo for years in two small hearts upstairs. The truth was ready. So was I. And if the past had taught me anything, it was this. When a woman walks into a room knowing her worth, even the people who doubted her have to decide, will they rise to meet her or watch her leave them behind? The mediation room smelled faintly of coffee and paper, sterile but heavy with tension. A round table stood in the center, folders stacked like shields before each seat. Martin sat beside me, his silver hair neatly combed, glasses perched low, calm as ever. Across from us, Kim and Daniel whispered furiously, their lawyer flipping through papers with quick, sharp motions. The mediator, a woman with a calm voice and steady eyes, began. We're here to discuss Mrs. Henley's financial contributions and the subsequent use of her funds. Let's allow each party to present. Daniel jumped in first, words spilling like bullets. She gave willingly. It was family support, not loans. She lived with us, ate our food, used our utilities. If she regrets it now, that's her problem. But it wasn't fraud. Kim nodded quickly, eyes shining with false indignation. Mom always said, "What's mine is yours." We believed her. Martin adjusted his glasses, slid a document forward. Belief is not ownership. Consent is not blank. Here are copies of every withdrawal, every unauthorized charge, every temporary expense that was never returned. The mediator scanned the pages, brows knitting. She passed them to Kim's lawyer, who paled as he flipped. These are extensive. I kept my hands folded, my voice quiet. I sold my home, gave them my savings, paid their bills. In return, I was placed in a laundry room and told to wash with a garden hose. These weren't gifts. They were sacrifices turned against me. The words hung in the air like a struck bell. Kim's face flushed crimson. You make it sound so cruel, she burst out. It wasn't like that, Mom. You're twisting it. Martin slid forward the photograph of the hose tied to the mirror. Date stamped, evidence undeniable. Cruelty doesn't need decoration. It's plain. The mediator leaned back, exhaling. It appears clear, Mr. and Mrs. Carter, she said to Kim and Daniel. That Mrs. Henley's funds were misused. At minimum, restitution is due. At most, she paused. This could become criminal. The room froze. Kim's lawyer whispered harshly. Daniel's face turned ashen, but Kim stared at me, eyes wide, trembling. Mom, you'd really do this? You'd ruin us? I finally spoke, steady and calm. I'm not ruining you, Kimberly. I'm saving me, and I'm making sure Max knows his grandmother valued honesty more than silence. Tears broke then, real ones this time. Her shoulders collapsed inward, pride stripped away. I didn't mean, her voice cracked. I just thought you'd always be there. I will always love you, I said softly. But love is not slavery. Respect is the proof of love, and you forgot that. The mediator's notes scratched across the page. Martin gathered the papers, efficient, final. Daniel slumped back, defeated. Kim wept silently, the mask gone. When it ended, I walked out into the autumn air, the sun spilling gold across the sidewalk. My steps were slow, but each one was mine. In my purse lay the agreement, the restitution plan, the recognition of my name and my rights. That evening, in my apartment, I brewed tea and set it by Robert's ledger. Max's drawing fluttered on the wall in the breeze from the open window. I sat in the glow of the maple tree outside, branches swaying like a witness nodding in approval. When Max came to visit the next weekend, he clutched my hand and asked, "Grandma, why don't you live with us anymore?" I knelt to his eye level, smoothing his hair back. "Because, sweetheart," I said, "I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I remembered to love myself." He smiled, nodded as if he understood more than a child should, and hugged me tightly. And in that embrace, I felt it fully. Not just survival, not just freedom, dignity, restored.